Hi, and thanks for sticking with the course so far. We hope that you are enjoying your learning experience. In this lesson we will discuss using gender-inclusive language in the workplace. Using gender-inclusive language means speaking and writing in a way that does not discriminate against a particular sex, social gender, or gender identity, and does not perpetuate gender stereotypes. Given the key role of language in shaping cultural and social attitudes, using gender-inclusive language is a powerful way to promote gender equality and eradicate gender bias. In English, there is a difference between grammatical gender, gender as a social construct, and sex assigned at birth as a biological characteristic of living beings. The English language has very few gender markers, such as pronouns and possessives like he, she, her and his, along with nouns and forms of address. Most English nouns do not have grammatical gender forms, like teacher or president. Whereas, a few nouns are specifically masculine or feminine like actor or actress, and waiter or waitress. Some nouns that once ended in man, now have neutral equivalents that are used to include both genders, like police officer for policeman or policewoman, spokesperson for spokesman, chair or chairperson for chairman. A challenge for gender-inclusive communication is the use of the masculine form by default. For example, every permanent employee must submit his credentials to human resources. Next, let's talk about best practices and strategies for inclusive language in the workplace. There are a number of strategies that can be applied when speaking or writing to be more gender-inclusive. First, let's discuss using non-discriminatory language. We will start with forms of address. When referring to or addressing specific individuals, use forms of address and pronouns that are consistent with their gender identity. If an employee appears as Ms., that is the form of address that should be used for her, and female pronouns are appropriate. Alternatively, and if the situation permits, you may ask the persons you are addressing or writing about what pronoun and form of address should be used for them. There should also be consistency in the way women and men are referred to. If one of them is addressed by their name, last name, courtesy title, or profession, the other one should be as well. Here are some examples of less inclusive and more inclusive forms of address. Less inclusive, Professor Scott and Zoe will attend the luncheon. More inclusive, Professor Scott and Professor Allen will attend the luncheon. You should use surname and title for both individuals. You should also avoid gender-biased expressions or expressions that reinforce gender stereotypes. Some examples of gender-biased language expressions are, she throws or runs like a girl. In a manly way. That's women's work. Thank you to the ladies for making the room more beautiful. Or, men just don't understand. Let's try another practice in phrasing. A less inclusive phrase could be, guests are cordially invited to attend with their wives. To make this phrase more inclusive you can say, guests are cordially invited to attend with their partners. You can be more gender inclusive by not making gender visible when it is not relevant for communication. To accomplish this you can use gender-neutral words. Here's an example. Less inclusive using gendered words. Mankind, man-made. More inclusive, humankind, humanity, human race, human-caused, or artificial. Here's an example of less inclusive and more inclusive use of gender-neutral words used in communications. Less inclusive could be, there are significant manpower shortages. More inclusive, there are significant staffing shortages. Let's talk about using plural pronouns and adjectives. In informal writing, such as emails, plural pronouns may be used as a shortcut to ensure gender inclusiveness. Such strategies are not recommended in formal writing. For example, before submitting your document, send it to Human Resources for their review. They will return it to you with comments. The pronoun they makes this statement more inclusive. When using the pronoun one, you can change the communication and make it more inclusive. Let's look at an example. Less inclusive. An employee earns less than he would in Seattle. More inclusive. An employee earns less than one would in Seattle. Just like the pronoun one, the pronoun who can also be an effective way to make language more inclusive. Less inclusive. If an employee is not satisfied with the decision, he can ask for reconsideration. And to make it more inclusive, an employee who is not satisfied with the decision can ask for reconsideration. Let's look at how using plural antecedents can support gender-inclusive language. When referring to generic subjects, plural antecedents may be used in order to avoid gendered pronouns. Here's an example. Less inclusive. A substitute teacher must certify grades that he has familiarized himself with. More inclusive. Substitute teachers must certify that they have familiarized themselves with the grades for that period. Another practice is to omit the gendered word. You can omit gendered words when they are not necessary for communication. Let's take a look at some examples. Less inclusive use of gendered words. Please ask the benefits coordinator to continue his or her efforts to review billing errors. When omitting the gendered words entirely, you can say, please ask the benefits coordinator to continue efforts to review billing errors. Here's another example. A person must reside outside of 50 miles before he may receive transportation benefits. To make this statement more inclusive, you can say, a person must reside outside of 50 miles before receiving transportation benefits. You can also use the passive voice to make communications more inclusive in the workplace. The passive voice is not an appropriate option for all communications in English. Using the passive voice often changes the emphasis of the sentence. However, it does offer an option for avoiding gendered constructions. Let's take a look at these examples. Less inclusive use of the passive voice. The director of communications must have direct and reliable evidence of the situation he is describing. When making the statement more inclusive, it can read, the author of a communication must have direct and reliable evidence of the situation being described. That's it for this lesson. To wrap up this lesson, a key takeaway should be understanding that inclusive language acknowledges the diversity around us, and helps convey respect to all people. It also helps us practice sensitivity to differences that we have amongst each other, and promote equality in and out of the workplace. Next, we will go over some awareness definitions.